Brandon says, I've gone through some of your T-SQL level up too. Good job so far. It feels like you're discussing the topics to me rather than preaching it.
Well, that's what I aim for.
T-SQL level up?
That's Eric's new one.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I named it
Oh,
T-SQL
level 2. Gotcha.
Yeah. So then that also means that I'm coming across as a preacher, maybe. Either that or you haven't watched my videos. Either one is probably okay, I guess. It's, yeah.
We'll never know.
I have to struggle with that. Like when there's some topics, like, and Tara's going to get pissed, always on availability groups. Like there's some parts of that where I'm like, you got to do this and you got to listen up good. I'm going to teach you with the stick. Where I'm just like, just don't make these mistakes. And I catch myself afterwards where I'm like, okay, I was waving that stick for like 10 minutes straight. Have a better time with that.
And I just want to give availability groups to everybody. You get it. You get it.
Yes.
I do give that caveat to clients though, learn from our mistakes.
Mm-hmm. It's sad. I was talking about the contract coming up in the company chat room where I'm going and flying somewhere. They use AGs just for load balancing. They don't even use them to fail over. Everything's asynchronous. Just scale out all kinds of reports. I'm like, oh, I love you. I love you already. It's genius.
What are they load balancing? The reads?
Yeah, just lots of Select queries. Really heinous reporting queries. So. Yeah.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Yeah. I'm all for that. Forget performance tuning anything. Just buy more Enterprise Edition servers.
Just scale it on out.
Yeah.
Yep. Racking up that bill.
Yeah. It's the opposite of NoSQL. Like all SQL.
Every SQL.
Every SQL. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So James says, do you know any good blog posts on setting up an archive process? And if you don't have good blog posts, I would say, what are some of the lessons you've learned around setting up an archive process?
Batching.
Go on.
Batching is super important with the archive process, especially because, if you're not using sort of native partitioning where it's easy to swap things in and out, or if you're not using partition views where like you sort of have free reign to, knock a table out, if you don't want the data in it anymore, if you don't feel like dealing with it, then you have to be really careful kind of dealing with sort of one giant monolithic table that you don't lock the whole thing down trying to delete a few 100,000 or million rows at a time. Kind of want to break that into smaller bites.
And what's the thing that I didn't ever understand until, I started doing the consulting thing was the whole lock escalation process.
Yeah, it's no fun.
I'm just like, I'm only deleting 15,000 rows. What's the big deal?
Why do I need a table lock? Oh.
Yeah. And when there's like 5 million rows in the table, 50 million rows in the table, what's the big deal? Tara, what about you? What other lessons have you learned along the way with building an archive process?
I mean, this databases that I've supported have had to maybe not archive the data, but purge the data based upon, whatever the data retention policy was for customers. These systems have existed since SQL Server 2000, and it was always just some kind of delete process, but batched, definitely batching, while loop and delete top, whatever. But for me, if it were a new system, I'd be putting table partitioning or partition views in place right off the bat, because I don't want to have to put those in place later on when the database gets bigger, because it's harder to put it in place later. So start off with it, even if you don't think your database is ever going to be big. Because I want to start avoiding the deletes and having to, most of the systems I've supported have been 24/7. Maybe there's a slower period, but it's still there's users using the system. And those deletes are just problematic, even in small batches, or because you do such a small batch, your job ends up taking hours because it's only doing a little bit of work at a time. So it starts creeping into the busy times.
I would say another thing I'd recommend with archiving is if you can archive at certain days and times, so whatever, say it's Sunday at 10 p.m., if you can only archive at that one time, which is awesome, after you're done archiving, put the database in read-only mode. The other database where you're archiving to, if you have the wonderful luxury of being able to archive to a different database, seal that database as read-only, and that's when you take your backup, and you don't have to back up that database again until your next round of archiving hits. Granted, that's more technical debt. It's more work that you got to go take on, but when you start to grow to large sizes of databases, it's totally awesome. Oh man, Michaela, you got to send me an instruction on how to pronounce your name because I'm going to see you all the time in here. You're a faithful listener.
It's usually Michaela.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. And
But then last week he said Michaela or something else in it. She was like, "You got it right," but we didn't know which one it was for.
It's like a Hawaiian kind of thing. Michelle.
Oh, Michelle.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
she just said, yeah, Michelle.
There we go. But see, the thing is, Michelle, I'm not going to remember next week. There's no
You
other
can't even
way.
say my name right, so you have no hope.
I literally had, when Tara started, I literally put a Post-it note on my screen that said Tara piece of paper, because that's the instruction that she gave me on how to pronounce her name.
That's what people teased me for in school.
Mm-hmm. And it works. So Michelle, a piece of paper, I might be able to remember that. Michelle says, CTEs versus temp tables. I noticed that on SQL 2016 Service Pack 1 that the CTE is using indexes from the table, which might imply that maybe the temp table is not. So Eric, speaking of your T-SQL level up, level 2, I believe you talk about CTEs inside there.
I sure do. I think I talk a little bit about temp tables as well. So CTEs are okay for certain things. I think what you're looking at is like, is there a performance difference? Well, the CTEs can use the base tables and they can use any indexes you have on the base tables. Whereas when you stick stuff into a temp table, you're responsible for indexing that temp table. CTEs have always been able to use indexes because they're accessing the base tables and the query. I think the main difference that I would put between them is that CTEs don't materialize, whereas temp tables do. So if you run a CTE, you're just essentially running a query, and you can use the results of that query and and anything after that. Whereas temp tables, you can stick data in there and then you can query them all day long.
The other thing I would say is if you know you're going to reuse something 50 times, that's temp tables make so much sense there.
Because there's a weird quirk with CTEs where if the more times in subsequent selects that you join to a CTE, the more times that syntax has to execute. So if you can just write a simple mock-up of this. I think I actually have a blog post about it. I'll find the link. Much easier than explaining.
And it seems so obvious when you look at the query. I'm like, I only wrote the CTE once. Shouldn't you just execute it? It's like some kind of subquery. You just execute it, gets once, and then everything gets joined to it. Michelle, see, I got it right there, Michelle. And the reason why is I left it on the screen where your answer was. Michelle says, yes, the CTE is called 8 times. Yeah, that's one of those examples where it might make more sense to do a temp table.
Hang on, I got a link coming up for you then, Michelle. I'm gonna say it's not Michelob.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But if the CTE is recursive, then if you switch that to a temp table, you're having to update that temp table, right, in order to achieve the same recursiveness.
And then recursive CTEs have their other problems too, which is, don't those are the ones that go single threaded?
Well, the recursive part, it runs serially. Yeah. Anything on the outside can go parallel. Which is funny. Ha 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 ha. Funny.
Ha ha.
Don't you love all these rules?
James says, Richie's here. James says, what is an alternative solution besides replication? He hates it.
Buy a printer.
Do you have Enterprise Edition? That's always my first question, because if you don't, replication is the right solution, in my opinion, for reporting. If you're asking about reporting.
Or log shipping.
I hate log shipping as a solution for reporting. Well, because as far as if you can put a delay in your restores, log shipping is a good solution. But every single time that transaction log has to be restored, it kicks out the reports. And generally speaking, you'll have long-running reports that could take a couple of hours to run. So you have to have a delay in your restores. And the systems that I've supported cannot have that long of a delay in the data. Even just the latency that's caused by, say, the archival process is problematic for the systems I've supported, or rebuilding indexes causes a lot of latency. So, log shipping delay, it just depends on your company, of course. But if you have Enterprise Edition, I'd go for a different solution.
What would be that solution?
I go with availability groups with a readable secondary.
It's so much easier. It doesn't matter if the database changes. It doesn't matter if people change. If they add 50 tables tomorrow, if they drop 50 tables tomorrow, AGs are just going to work.
One of the drawbacks with AGs, though, is that, in transactional replication, a lot of times your reporting solution would have different indexes because you just didn't need those on the OLTP side. You needed more indexes on the reporting solution. That's not possible in an AG. So you're stuck with putting all of your objects, tables, indexes, everything has to go on the writable side so that the readable side has it. So it's a big drawback. And if you do a synchronous replica, synchronous readable secondary, then that can cause performance issues to the writable side. So that's, usually you may want to do asynchronous where there's some latency.
You can have different amounts of data on both sides. For example, you can not replicate deletes over to your secondary, so then that way you can keep forever history over on your replication subscribers. Pretty slick stuff. Uday says, do you guys have any recommendations or blog posts on how to approach resolving deadlocks?
One thing I can think of is anything that Jonathan Cahias writes. He's the deadlock expert that I know about, at least. I've attended a deadlock presentation he did at PASS a few years ago. It was great, good information. It's a really complicated topic, and if there's anyone that has a blog post out there, it'd probably be him. They're not fun to troubleshoot. I know he thinks it's fun, but most of us really want to stay away from that. I've had to do significant deadlock troubleshooting where just one store procedure would take like 3 weeks to figure out, because it was just, the store procedure wasn't necessarily complex, but understanding everything else that went into it. It was hard to figure out. I on systems that I've supported where I know what the application can do, I've implemented recommitted snapshot isolation level to help reduce deadlocks and blocking, but not all systems can support that.
And the other thing with RCSI is if you're dealing with dueling write operations, then that does, you don't get much dice out of that. And enabling snapshot isolation to deal with dueling writes is complicated.
No, I didn't even know that they could.
Yeah, you have to have all sorts of crazy error handling and.
It's like I have it as a bullet point on a slide. You can use this for updates. Any questions? Okay, no, great.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I could just kind of cheat on deadlocks. So what I would do is I would run SP Blitz Index. With SP Blitz Index, it gives you this warning about aggressive indexes, meaning indexes that have had a lot of lock weights on them. This isn't smoking gun proof that it's tied into your deadlocks. It's just that in the kinds of places where I see aggressive indexes warnings, those are usually the tables that are involved. And then I'll just look at what are the right non-clustered indexes to add into this scenario. And maybe do I have one of two things is happening. Either I have way too many indexes and updates are taking forever to lock all of them, or I don't have any. Like there's a clustered index on a table, and every time I'm trying to do an update, I'm locking the whole hunkin' table. I'd also say this is a great time for monitoring software too. If you have a SQL Sentry Performance Advisor, or what they call like SQL Sentry, Sentry 1, SQL Sentry for SQL Server Sentry Pro, whatever. IDERA SQL Diagnostic Manager or Quest Spotlight, they will all send you emails with the deadlock graph every time deadlocks occur. I'm not saying that makes it easy. It's still sucks.
I was going to say, I had Performance Advisor at my last job, and that 3-week store procedure. It took 3 weeks because we were doing load testing, trying to simulate production load to cause the deadlocks to happen, because you can't necessarily replicate this in your test environment, dev environment. You need a production load on it. So it took us a while, and plus I was also working on other things. But I had the deadlock graph. I'm just like, okay. So I knew what indexes were involved, and I knew what processes were involved. I was like,
in one SSMS window, you hit begin train and F5. Then the other SSMS window.
Yeah, and this system, they use no lock like it was the turbo button, because this was implemented before I joined the company. But no lock was everything, and it still was deadlocking.
If you don't have a monitoring tool, what I would probably just fall on the sword and fire up extended events to catch deadlocks, because you get the whole deadlock graph when you catch it.
It's pretty low. It doesn't use a lot of resources when it's just because it fires after it happens. Yeah. It's not like you're gathering execution plans, which is a major hit.
Who does that?
Lou Fritz says, Kendra Little has a great free session on
There we go.
deadlocks. I totally forgot about this. So if you go to sequelworkbooks.com, this is Kendra's new site for training courses. And she has a course that's free right now. She may end up charging for it later. So if you want it, I would go sign up for it now. Look at her troubleshooting, blocking, locking, and deadlocks for beginners.
I might even check that out, except I hate deadlocks. So that's a toss-up. Do I really want to learn more? I do want to learn from Kendra. Yeah, she's a great presenter.
She's a It was like when we first started carving up our video courses or our in-person courses, Jeremiah, Kendra, and I were carving up modules, like which ones of us were going to tackle which courses. And one of them was licensing. We're like, we have to have licensing in the senior DBA class. And every all of us made the same face that you did. All of us were like, screw that. And I lost the rock, paper, scissors. And now I love licensing. Now I'm like, because I had to spend like 3 weeks of my life researching licensing to write training decks. Now I'm like, it's so cool.
Learning to love licensing.
It's funny about licensing that the Microsoft employees don't even understand the licensing. They will tell you need to buy licensing for the server. It ends up being completely false. That it's just it's a salesperson trying to get you to buy more licenses, but they don't understand it either. And so you pull out the legal document and say, no, right here it says I don't have to.
Yeah, they just hope you won't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you need licenses for that.
Bad.
I just always install Dev Edition and I'm good.
There you go.
Says the guy who's doing all of our production work. Yeah.
No one ever checks. They have so many customers. What are the odds?
We're good.
It's like cigarettes. What are the odds? Who can get a little sick in a while?
Oh, God. This is why our company's going to go down the drain, people. You'll remember this moment.
But you know what's funny? Two jobs ago, I was assigned the licensing task, and it was about a month before I left my job.
It's going to take me about 35 days.
Now you leave has nothing to do with that licensing, does it? Oh, no, not of course not. Oh, no.
Can you hand over the work that you'd gotten done so far? Oh, my dog ate it. Oh, dang. I had a hard drive crash.
It was a printer jam, and that was it.
I lost my 3.5 floppies. It was here somewhere.
I'm missing floppy 35 of 35. Have the other 34.
So remember those, God. Installing Windows NT 3.5. I forget floppies there were. It was like 40 or something.
Yes. I remember signing up for a Windows beta just so I could get 30-some free floppy disks.
Yeah.
It's like, this is awesome. They're just going to give
storage.
them. So we've come to a point in the podcast where we've never really wanted to take ads on the podcast, but we're going to go and start something new. We always wanted to keep it purely educational. But Microsoft came to us and they said, hey, you know what? There's some parts of SQL Server that just don't get the attention that they deserve. And we want to start publicizing these parts of SQL Server so that people can get more mileage out of them. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our first podcast sponsor. Now, we're not perfect. All of us have our little individual quirks. We don't highlight the right things in the script when we go to execute. We write things we didn't really mean to intend. Sometimes we import the wrong data, or sometimes we just code a really crappy stored procedure that has the wrong impacts that we don't want. You don't want to redefine all your tables from scratch, and that's why our podcast today for this week is brought to you by the delete command. The delete command doesn't judge whether it's a single row or thousands. Delete is there for you in your darkest hours to hide all of your mistakes. Delete is there when you need to hide the bodies. So remember, when you're in a dark place, there's always the delete command. So thanks very much to the delete command for being the first sponsor on our webcast.
A subsidiary of Truncate Co.
Subsidiary of Truncate Incorporated.
Yeah, don't use those crappy where clauses. They tend to foul things up. So
it's a performance tuning technique. You don't the where just slows you down. Where would require you to use an index.
It's complicated. There's logic. You have to think about them.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to do that?
Don't do that.
So Ben says, when we're using SSIS and we're importing from a flat file, can the identity column in the destination table ensure preservation of original order of rows in the source file? Oh, you're getting tricky. Am I the only one who's done this? Judging by the looks.
With SSIS, yeah, maybe. I haven't done that with SSIS.
So the way that the table is sorted, even if you have an identity column, that doesn't mean the table's sorted in that order. Even if the clustered index is on it, the order that the rows go in paired with the clustered index can matter. So you want to have an order by basically on whatever you're pulling out of the source file. You can sort the stuff in SSIS to determine the direction of what's coming out. I just would never rely on it, because what happens if you start loading duplicate rows? You're going to if you tune the SSIS package, you're going to update existing rows so they won't be in the same order in the table.
If
Eric,
I'm moving data via SSIS and I want to preserve the identity column value, which is a little bit different than what Ben's asking, then I'm using the set identity insert on option so that I'm copying over exactly the value. That's a sysadmin function though, so you have to make sure that the process has sysadmin. But I don't want to have to. I don't want different values on two systems for the same row. So I'm preserving the identity value with that function.
Okay, so why do we care about order with an identity column, right? So identity column is a surrogate key. As a surrogate key, it's meaningless. It should never have any sort of meaning. So when we put some sort of order on it, now we're inferring some sort of meaning onto that. Just dump it, have a separate column and put an order there if you really need it, but it shouldn't be on the identity column at all.
He says there's no identity in the source file, but the problem is that the order of the rows in the source table is critical. It's just not specified in the source file. Yeah, with like SSIS, you can add your own fields as part of the import, and that's what you would add a row number as part of that.
Exactly.
Don't rely on the database's side, because you're going to import the file over and over again, and you want that row number every time. So.
So the order of the data in the file is sorted from what I'm gathering. So it's in the correct order. And when you are inserting from a file to SQL Server with an identity column, it should preserve the order, because it's going to be inserting row by row by row over.
Yeah, I just worry about somebody doing something like resetting an identity field. Yeah. You reseed it and go in the negative direction, anything like that. He says, derived field, you rock. Yeah, every now and then we get one right.
Or can that be parallelized? Because I wonder if that might screw up order as well.
It will screw up order if it is parallelized. If you want to do a bulk upload on that, it will screw it up. So yeah, you want to do that before you do all your imports.
Nice. Colleen says she went to Kendra's past 2016 session on deadlocking and said it rocked. Yeah, Kendra's a great teacher. Really fun to learn from.
I was there and I was completely lost, but I'm not a data guy.
Yeah, wasn't that the session that she saw? We all showed up and said, "You guys are beginners."
Yeah, that was the one.
I still learned some stuff.
God. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true with every session at Summit. I mean, I don't think I've ever gone somewhere and not learned something. There's always some tidbit where you're like, oh, whoa, I never thought of that. So speaking of which, Erik and I have a pre-con this year. Dun, dun, dun. Erik, so what's our pre-con about this year at Past Summit?
Perf tuning. But not just regular perf tuning, expert perf tuning. In the year 2017, so we're not going to sit there and talk about Profiler with you. We're not going to.
Oh man, I'd written a session already.
You're fired. Fired from the pre-con.
Damn it. Mm-hmm.
You can still get my copy.
So yeah, so it's about 2016 and 2017. So what are you talking about during the pre-con?
Well, I'm going to talk about that new store procedure that's up on the screen. Oh, that was up on the screen. Now I look dumb. Now I look quite foolish. So I wrote a store procedure recently. Another one. This one is called SP Blitz Query Store, and this one it does what for the query store what SP Blitz Cache does for your plan cache. It has a little bit of a different method to it. It goes in and kind of looks at like your worst periods of time for certain metrics, and then collects anything that ran during those time periods. So it's a little bit different. You're not just giving it a one sort order and saying, give me the whole thing by this. But I'm going to be talking about how to use that to sort of delve into query store the way you delve into Blitz into the plan cache with Blitz Cache. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. I'm going to start off with looking at wait types. I'm like, screw perfmon counters, screw disk queue length, screw page life expectancy, all those things. They're not really relevant anymore. What makes so much more sense is just asking SQL Server, hey, what's your bottleneck? And then focusing on that one thing, because none of us can do a perfect job of systems administration. You're going to have a slow temp DB. You're not going to have enough RAM. You're not going to have perfect indexes. Just focus on the one thing that the business users are going to notice as quickly as possible. So we're going to talk about how to analyze wait stats with SP Blitz first, how to look them at short periods of time or since the server startup, and then a quick decoder ring as to which wait types mean different things. Ben says, when are any of you in the Mid-Atlantic? I don't think ever. Mid-Atlantic is like North Carolina, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
South Carolina.
I can't row that far either.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything planned for that anytime soon. I'm in Boston the end of this month, but that's as close as I get. Richie,
I think south. If I went any further south, I'd be out of Brooklyn. So I don't want to do that.
and yeah, if Richie went any further north, he'd be out of Miami-Dade. So yeah, neither of those work.
I'd be out of northern Cuba. We must.
There be snakes.
Yeah.
Right.
Colleen says, one more and I'll shut up. I went to your session too, Brent, and waited for a selfie, but the line was too long.
It's crazy.
There was no line for me. Tara had a longer line than me.
Yeah.
I was surprised when people would come up to me while we were walking, and Brent would be right there, and they're like, "Hey, Tara, I recognize you from." How are you recognizing me? Here's Brent.
Yes, it'll be even funnier as the more of those cartoons get out. It's fun. Tara has a new It Rocks cartoon, and it looks pretty cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this week at Office Hours, and we will see you guys next week. Adios, everybody.